John begins his gospel account with a prologue explaining the divine origin and mission of Jesus. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth.
Well, good evening to you. It is lovely to see you here, and what a good voice you are in. This is the last of 3 carol services that have taken place over the course of this weekend. They seem to have got progressively better, and the quality of people, of course, I'm talking about here largely. But I have to say, in fact, the musicians, the singers behind me, around me, I think it's the best I've ever heard them. I've come to these events for a few years now. And it's a wonderful, wonderful sound that you're making. Thank you so much for all you put into this, and to those others who've been involved with making this place look so beautiful and function so smoothly. I don't know if you're the kind of person who likes surprises. I am exactly that person. It's me all over, I have to say. And I've noticed it tends to come to the fore, this little quirk of mine, at Christmas time. What do you want for Christmas, comes the question. And my answer is, whatever. Surprise me. A nice red Porsche, some straighteners, maybe something for the house. So anything really. I'll take it. You think of it. Of course, that's not a very satisfying answer at all, is it? To somebody who is not a surprise person. Come on, give me some idea. There must be something you've got your eyes on. Because I'm having none of it. I'll tell you the exact present I want. You listening? Here it is. The one I haven't chosen. That's me. I'm the most awful person to live with. I'm totally aware of that. But I like to think I simply like surprises. That's me. And I think I like them most in Christmas presents because, let's face it, there are so few other surprises at Christmas time. Isn't that right? I mean, face it, Christmas is all about doing things exactly the same. The same carols, the same decorations, the same stockings, the same routines, church perhaps, or lunch and walk, Queen's speech, Agatha Christie or whatever it is, the latest BBC drama, whatever, you know what it's like. Nothing changes. No one wakes up on Christmas morning and thinks, oh, I wonder what will be on the menu for lunch today. Tricky one. That's how traditions work. Predictability is part of the event. So I'm thinking, give me something, just one thing to have at Christmas by way of surprise, perhaps when I open my presents. Is that really too much to ask? The truth is, though, the Christmas story itself is full of surprises. It's all about them. I mean, you heard the readings as much as I did just a moment ago, during the course of the evening. All sorts of utterly out there, extraordinary, unpredictable things going on back at that first Christmas in Bethlehem. From astronomical quirks to biological reproductive impossibilities, angelic appearances in the field, a king being called being born in a cattle room. There's nothing predictable about it. Surprise after surprise in the Christmas story. But I wonder if the two greatest surprises of all are those startling personal revelations that we get, wrapped up in the story. Personal revelations, of course, can always be startling. You don't really want them most of the time. Imagine your mum sat you down this Christmas at some point and said, "Look, dear, it's time I told you something about your father. I know you thought he was just an accountant from Swindon with an unfortunate sense of humour and questionable fashion choices, but there is actually more to him than that. He is, in fact, fill in the blank, ... He is the founder and principal shareholder of PayPal." Oh, that'd be a nice one, wouldn't it? He is the Dagenham axe murderer. Slightly less welcome, perhaps. He is third in line to the throne of Denmark, and let me tell you, just yesterday there was a car crash in which number 1 and 2 are no more. He's moved up the rankings. Personal revelations. They can be wonderful, they can be alarming, but either way they can turn our world upside down if they come anywhere close to us. You're not the person I thought you were. And you see, wrapped up in the drama of Christmas comes a whole double bill of startling personal revelations. I thought it might be worth just digging them out this evening and bringing them up to the surface. The first of them is actually very personal. It's about you and me. It's that we're far more exposed than we thought we were. That final reading we just had a moment ago is actually the opening lines to the most famous biography of the most famous person in history. If you hadn't read it before, it is well worth pressing on with. We've got free copies actually on the way out this evening, so do pick one up as you go. It's called John's Gospel, and countless lives have been turned upside down when people have read it, so beware. But did you notice how bluntly John talks about the status of humanity? They are completely in the dark, he says, these people, the world in which Jesus walks in. End of that first paragraph there, if you've still got your booklet in front of you. Where does the light shine? In the darkness. Then it comes again, the darkness. That is, in a sense, the one-word caption on the picture of humanity placed by John, the biographer here, on humanity. Darkness. Not very flattering, is it? And it sounds as though the darkness wasn't even acknowledged until the light appeared. It's like walking into a teenager's room at, say, midday. There is said teenager doing teenagerish things on his phone, perhaps. Lights off, blinds down, curtains drawn. Total gloom. But they don't see it. For them, it's just normal. It takes you going in and switching on the lights and putting back the curtains for them to realize the gloom that they were in. And they're left cowering at that point, aren't they? Turn it off, close the curtains again. It took the appearance of light to expose the darkness. And so it is with all of us. We're so used to the gloom of our lives, we don't even notice it. Now, when John, the biographer here, talks about darkness, he seems to mean it in a couple of different senses. He means it in the sense of our lack of understanding. We just don't have answers to the really important questions out there. We don't know what life is about. We don't know what we're here for. We don't know anything much when it comes to the big ones. That's what he's saying. And it's amazing because 2,000 years after these words were first penned, it still rings so true, doesn't it? There's just endless books and blogs and podcasts and documentaries and social media posts and just late night sessions over a pint down the pub or wherever it is, people sharing their opinions. Blah, 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 as Greta Thunberg would say. But we don't get anywhere. Just don't seem to actually know anything when it comes to the really important questions of life. So we're in the dark, in the sense of a lack of real understanding. But the other sense that John means it in is in terms of, I guess, the darkness of our lives, the dark deeds that we get up to, the way we live, our behavior. I'm just not quite as nice a person as I like to think I am. That's the point. And again, it's a good point, isn't it? Because in a world when we keep on telling each other how wonderful we are, you're amazing, you've got to believe in yourself, in that world that we live in, actually this brutal realism rings more true, doesn't it? Doesn't it resonate more deeply with us? Think about it just for a moment. You ever had that experience when you've opened up your banking app and looked at the bank balance there in front of you, and you find yourself confronted with a slightly bigger number than you were expecting, and you feel good about it, don't you? Now, why do you feel that way? You ask yourself. Why do I feel good about having more money? And you do anything to avoid the obvious answer, which is that you just care about money a little bit too much. You're what you might call greedy. Next day, you're in your car and the person in front of you doesn't indicate around a roundabout or something, or drives 5 miles an hour slower than they ought to, considering they're in front of you, or some other outrageous offence that really riles you. You under your breath, you criticise them, don't you? Come on, you idiot! And then you think, hang on, now, how many times have I done exactly that same thing, driven just like that, when I've been tired or distracted, or I haven't been in a tearing hurry, or whatever it is? So it's another self-discovery moment, isn't it? Not only am I greedy, I'm a hypocrite. Next day, you're late for a meeting or a class or a meal or something like that. And you're giving your excuses out. They come one after the other. You find a way to blame the traffic or the people that called you just as you were leaving, or, if in doubt, the government. When you know the truth is, if you'd left when you intended to leave, you'd have been there on time. And so what is it now? Not only am I greedy and a hypocrite, I'm a liar too. On it goes, day after day. We make these discoveries every day of the examined life, the reflective life, is a day of growth in self-awareness. Again and again, we're caught off guard about the kind of people we really are. It's just very, very humbling, isn't it? It's just the truth, though, that we're being confronted with. The truth that we are in darkness, in our minds, in our hearts, intellectually and morally. And here's the thing about it all. It matters. It really matters. Because being in the dark leads to being out of touch with the light, with God. Did you notice the language of relationship in that reading that we had halfway through the third paragraph? God sends his light into the world, and the response is what? The world did not receive him. That is, we pushed him away. Next line down, there's an offer of something to come. Becoming children of God is the offer. But it's not yet a reality, is it? Right now, there's a disconnect between us and God. And it seems to flow from being in darkness. I wonder if there's somebody in your family who tends to sit apart from the rest of the family. Someone who's just cut themselves off from the others, or who in fact has been cut off by them. It doesn't matter how it came to be that way. It is that way now. There is an alienation there, and it's so sad. This chasm that just lies there between them and the rest of you. And that is how it is between us and God. We're out in the cold. Darkness in our minds and in our hearts has led to us being cut off spiritually. It's a principle we've learned all the way through the COVID era, isn't it? That principle that contamination leads to isolation. Well, that's our story, isn't it? That is the deeply troubling revelation that we're confronted with in the Christmas drama, that in and of ourselves we are totally in the dark, intellectually and morally, and therefore out of touch with God. But there is another revelation to come, and you'll be very pleased to hear it is a much happier one. It's a personal revelation about God, that he is in fact much more engaged than we might have realized. It's very easy, isn't it, to think of God as somehow totally uninterested in the world. I mean, look at the mess the world is in right now. Where on earth is he? If he's there at all, why doesn't he just get on and actually do something for a change? He's like that tech support guy you ring up and eventually get through to after 45 minutes on the phone, and he just barks down the phone and says, "Have you tried turning it off and then switching it on again?" And you think, really? Is that all you've got? I want more. Can you identify with that frustration at God? The idea that it seems like he can't be bothered to roll up his sleeves and actually do something and get involved. Well, be prepared for a shock, because that is not the God that we see in the Christmas drama. If you know that classic climate change disaster movie, The Day After Tomorrow, you may remember how that movie ends. The dad has made this extraordinary, epic journey to reach his son, who's holed up in the New York Public Library under hundreds of feet of snow or whatever it is. And finally he gets there with his big, heavy torch. He enters the room where his son is. He shines that big torch of his all over the place until eventually it lights on his son. And then he takes his son home, or at least to safety. Well, that is the story here at the beginning of John's Gospel, the biography of Jesus. It's a story of God shining his light into the darkness and bringing us home. At first, he shines his light. There it is, end of the first paragraph. The light shines in the darkness. Again, at the start of the third paragraph, the true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. That the light enters the gloom of our lives and takes away the darkness. But where does the light come from? Well, as it turns out, the light is actually the self-shining of God himself. A first paragraph again. In him, in the Word, who is in fact God, was life, and that life was the light. The Christmas story is all about God stepping into the world and lighting the place up, ending the reign of darkness. And no wonder those carols that we've been singing this evening are so full of joy. Joy to the world went that carol. A thrill of hope. The weary world rejoices Now, that could be the tagline of Christmas 2021, couldn't it? A new future is possible, and it comes in the form of a little baby boy. I've got a present here. Here it is. It's some nice shortbread, petticoat tails. Don't know what they are, but they sound nice. They've got a nice little tin they come in. This is actually a present that I was going to give to Ali over there, just to say thank you and how wonderful she is and that kind of thing. That's my present. If I wanted to do that, this would fit quite nicely into this bag, I thought. In it goes. And it's a perfect size for it. I'm all set now. But supposing I actually wanted to cast my generosity a little bit beyond Ali. Suppose I wanted to go for giving a present to every single person in this room. And I wanted to give between you everything that I've got. Everything I own. And I wanted to squeeze all of it into this bag. Now, that would be a tough ask, wouldn't it? Be nigh on impossible, I would think. And yet, here's the extraordinary thing. That is exactly what God did in the one who was born in Bethlehem. See, God gave everything that he had to give. Everything that he was in himself to everyone in the world who would take it. And he squeezed all of it into one little baby boy who grew up to change history. It's absolutely mind-blowing when you come to think of it. 1,500 years ago, there was a famous African bishop called Augustine who wrote lots. And he famously brought out the paradoxes of that little baby being God himself. He was created of a mother whom he created. He was carried by hands that he formed. He cried in the manger with wordless infancy. He, the Word, without whom all human eloquence is mute. Get your head around that if you can. But this really was God shining his light into the darkness of the world and our lives in Jesus. And then more than that, he acts to bring us home. Again, middle of the third paragraph, to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Again, in the final paragraph, the word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. You see, where we in and of ourselves are out of touch with God, alienated from him, here is an offer of relationship restored. God has acted in Jesus to win us a seat at his own family table, if we want it. It would cost him dear, that offer. Jesus would grow up and go to his death to secure that invitation, to deliver on that invitation. But he was prepared to do that. We've got used to those images on our TV screens, haven't we, in the evening news, of those healthcare heroes donning their protective clothing and putting their masks on in order to treat COVID patients, one after the other, day after day. It's amazing. But interestingly, that approach doesn't work for our spiritual problem, our spiritual illness. No, for that, Jesus would have to take off all his protection. He'd have to open himself up to contamination and eventually death in order to bring light, to rid us of our darkness and take us home. Talk about startling revelations. Yeah, what was it we were saying about God? That he's unengaged, distant, detached? Could not be further from the truth, can it? And now, all these years later, the invitation still stands to all of us who recognize the truths of those revelations. That humbling truth about our predicament, that we're in darkness and out of touch with our Maker. And the truth about God's engagement, that he's actually shone his light into our darkness and taken all the action that's necessary to take to bring us home. The invitation stands. Let me make my dwelling with you, says Jesus, to each one of us. And let's make a whole new start. Come home to God. It's been said the shortest line from 0 to infinity is Jesus. And you can see why, can't you? Because he bridges the gap between us and the infinite one, God himself. Maybe your surprise Christmas present this year will prove to have been simply being here tonight and hearing that invitation from Jesus, and perhaps even responding to it. How would you do that? Well, you might want to take some time and think it through a bit more carefully. I think Jonty is going to share some ideas with us about how we might do that. But if you are actually ready to respond, you could do it right now and right here in the words of a short prayer that I'm going to put up on the screen now. There it is. I'll invite all of us to bow our heads, and if you're ready to make these words your own, then maybe echo them in the quietness of your own heart. So let's bow our heads and pray together. Lord God, I see the darkness there has been in my own life. And I thank you for coming in Jesus to shine your light into that darkness and offer me a way back to life with you through his life and death. From this day on, Lord God, make your home with me as I make my home with you, and as I seek to live my life in the light of Jesus. Amen.